Kelso Horne never claimed that he was a hero. One day when I asked him about that, he said, "I didn't do anything heroic. I was just doing my job." Well, if you've ever talked to a World War II veteran or almost any veteran, they would tell you that same thing. I was just doing my job. But there was this photograph. Appeared on the cover of Life magazine, August 14, 1944. To many people, I think I may have coined it, I call it the face of Kelso Horne, but more importantly, the face of the American GI in Europe. When the editors of Time magazine were putting together the Millennium issue in the year 2000 and showing a collage of photographs that represented the people of the United States and the world for the year 2000 and the Millennium, they chose the face of Kelso Horne to represent the American soldier, the ground soldier, the paratrooper in Europe during World War II. It was this picture that was chosen above all others to represent that face. Kelso Horne was the third child of Josiah and Maud Crowder Horne. He was born on the 12th day of November, 1912. As a young man, he grew up in Lawrence County. He told me he remembered the time that he was looking up in the sky and saw people jumping out of airplanes with parachutes at air shows in Dublin. And he decided, well, that's something he might like to try one day. So in June of 1944, he couldn't wait to be drafted. He was already a fairly old man by military standards. So he joined the United States Army. In February of 1943, he was commissioned a second lieutenant and applied for entrance to jump school. Well, they took him out one day along with some other aspiring paratroopers, and they shot off a rocket up into the air with a dummy attached to it and a parachute. And when the dummy's coming down, one of the sergeants picks up a machine gun and starts to shoot the dummy. And then he looks at everybody. Now, how many of you men want to still be paratroopers? Kelso said, "I do." He stood firm in his desire and went on to train in places in North Carolina, Tennessee, and New York. He knew that one day that he would be training for the invasion of Europe. They just didn't know when or where that was going to happen. Finally, within just a few hours of D-Day, the regiment, the 508th Paratroop Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division, was given orders that they were going to jump 8 to 10 miles inland from the eastern coast of the Cotentin Peninsula west of St. Mary Glace, France. They were to join with the 4th Army Division, one of those men sitting right here, Jasper Webb, and to form a defensive perimeter to secure the area. On the evening of June the 5th, they were making their final equipment checks, getting a last meal for some of them, getting a cup of coffee, some donuts, and I imagine a lot of them started praying. They blackened their faces so they wouldn't be seen as they flew out of the sky. At 2:06 in the morning, on the morning of June 6, 1944, Kelso Horne moved to the door of the C-41 transport plane. He looked down, he could see the waves breaking on the shore at Normandy. Men started yelling, "Go, jump, go." Kelso waited, it wasn't his time yet. He looked down and spotted the river that he was supposed to land near, and then jumped into the air, not knowing what was waiting for him below. The C-41s were drifting apart from each other. Most of the pilots had never flown at night, and they certainly had never flown in a formation of this kind. Some of the planes were shot down. Bob Mathias, who is given credit by Stephen Ambrose as being the first casualty of D-Day and the oldest paratrooper in D-Day, was wounded as he stood in the doorway. Tragically, he died before he even hit the ground. You do the math, 1912, 1944, Kelso Horne was almost going on 32 years old, so he was by far older than the person who's given the credit for being the oldest paratrooper. Remember, those who were alive then do remember, a lot of these battles, D-Day, were fought by boys, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, some even 18. So Kelso was, he was an old man by those standards. He finally landed in a small field about 1 mile from St. Mary Glace. He found it very difficult to get out of his harness. Well, they were carrying somewhere upwards of 100 pounds of gear with them. Some of the unlucky ones wound up landing in the trees, landing in the lakes and the rivers. Those that landed in the lakes and the rivers tragically sunk to the bottom. It was about a week after the invasion when Kelso and his platoon were walking down a road, and up drives General Lawton Collins, the 7th Corps commander, and he asked to speak with the commanding officer. Well, he spoke with Lieutenant Horne. And Kelso told the general that the Germans were in the town up ahead, so the general decided what lots of generals do, just turn the Jeep around and go back to where he'd be a little safer. It was about that time that Bob Landry, a photographer for Life magazine, hopped out of the Jeep and said, "Hey buddy, can I take your picture?" And he instructed him to go over there beside the road, to kneel down and just stare off into the distance. He snapped the picture, got back in the Jeep and left. Nothing much was said. Kelso didn't think too much of it at the time, just somebody took his picture. Later on, he had mentioned it to his wife that it was going to be on Life magazine. At the time, they didn't dream that it would be the cover photograph. But the word started slowly getting out. As I was coming in today, Harry Claxton was telling me a little story which I do really want to repeat. The Horne family knew, and they lived about a mile up the road from where we are today. They knew this magazine was coming out, they just didn't know what day. So they instructed the postmaster or the postman that came to blow the horn, and they would all come out to the mailbox and everybody look at it together. Well, as the story goes, when the postmaster got down here to Sandy Ford Creek, he just started blowing the horn all the way up to the Horne house up the road. The whole community was excited beyond belief. It was one of our own men on the cover of the most famous magazine in the world at the time. As Independence Day 1944 approached, the 508th Regiment was moving north. Their objective was Hill number 95. Along the way in those a month or so, Kelso was nearly killed twice in very close proximity to men who were just standing around talking and were shot or killed. Kelso, as a lieutenant, started questioning the wiseness to attack this hill. It was an open hill. He was quoted as saying there wasn't even a single rock to hide behind. But the attack went off as planned, and as he moved out of the hedgerow, he got about 10 feet, and all of a sudden he felt something, as he described, it felt like a baseball hit him in the chest. It knocked him down, and when he got up, he had noticed that it even knocked his pistol out. Well, that took Kelso Horne out of the war. He was sent to a hospital in England, where he arrived a couple of days later. The attack went on the next day and was successful. But Kelso remained in the hospital in England until the early days of August, when he was lying in bed one day, and the man next to him said, "Hey, buddy, you got a boy." And he looked, and he was puzzled. He didn't know what he meant. He knew that his wife was expecting a child, and they had tried to get word to him. So Frank Cochran, a local man, put the announcement of Kelso Horne Jr., Casey Horne's birth, in the July 25th edition of Stars and Stripes. So that's how Kelso came to find out that he had a son. Casey, Kelso Jr., also joined the United States Army, and like his father. And the most vivid conversation I remember having with Kelso, and I was telling this to the lady from WMAZ, was the day he came in and was telling me the story about Kelso C. Horne III, who was going to graduate from jump school and get his wings as a paratrooper. They weren't just any ordinary pair of wings. They were those same wings that had been pinned on Kelso more than 50 years ago and now almost 70 years ago. I think that was probably meant more to him in our conversations than being on the cover of Life magazine. From England, he was sent to other hospitals. He never returned to his unit. He came home on Valentine's Day of 1945. What a wonderful Valentine's Day present for his wife, Doris. And I'll just digress a minute. As a child born in the mid-1950s and growing up in the early 60s, when we thought about World War II, we thought, wow, that was a long time ago. 1962, that was only 17 years before my 6th birthday. I was born on the day that the Germans surrendered in Europe, May 7th. And I never thought when I would see Miss Doris Horne as a substitute teacher that her husband was one of those soldiers, or Miss Doris Horne, Sally Horne, who was our principal, that her brother-in-law was one of those soldiers that I would see in television shows or on movies like The Longest Day. But ladies and gentlemen, the story of Kelso Horne is the story of a hero. He never claimed to be one, and that he never did anything heroic. Maybe not. A lot of the heroes died on the shores of Normandy and the lakes and streams and even in the trees of Western France. But it was the face, this face, the face that represented the determination of millions of young American boys and men, both not only in Europe, but in Asia and the South Pacific as well, that were determined that no matter what the cost, they were going to achieve freedom for the people of the United States. There's a very well-known movie, and I'll close with this, called Saving Private Ryan. It is a fictional story, somewhat, about a school teacher who is a captain in the infantry. And he's given the mission to locate one of the remaining brothers who had not been killed during the war and to extricate him out of France. Along the way, they keep fighting the war. And as I saw that movie, which if you've never seen it, as brutal as the opening 30 minutes are, I encourage everybody to watch it, to see how horrible, especially on Omaha Beach, that was. But the way I see these millions of American servicemen, they were all there to save Private Ryan. Not the Private Ryan in the movie, not the soldier who may have had 1 or 2 brothers already killed. The Private Ryans they were trying to save were their 8-year-old brothers back at home, their sisters who might be serving in the military or on the home front. They were serving to save all the Private Ryans of the world, the little 9-year-old boys that they didn't know were going to grow up and we were going to still be fighting that horrible war. So on this day, it is a great honor to me personally to have known Kelso Horne. I wished he'd have talked more, but he was one of those that really didn't talk. But it is his face that stays with me. And
if tomorrow all the things were gone I worked for all my life, and I have to start again with my children and my wife, I thank my God above to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't a doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from New York to LA. There's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't a doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Yes, I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there